me just check in with you. How are y'all feeling? Please raise your hand. Share how you're feeling.
Mad.
Or did you want to share something?
Oh, frustrated.
Frustrated.
Emotionally drained.
It's emotionally draining even before you watch this movie, right? Just like living that constantly in fear that something's going to happen, that the world is going to end. Yes.
I feel
Grateful. Wow, I love that. We want you to watch this film and make sure that you don't leave hopeless. We want you to watch this film and encourage a call to action. And tonight we have Prem Thakker. He's from Zeteo, so to make him feel welcome. He's from DC, y'all, and he's actually documenting the day in the life of Hasan Piker. So we're very lucky to have you today. And with that, let's make some noise for our very own LAer, Hasan Piker. I want to keep things concise. I wanted to talk about a success story really quickly. I was speaking to Hasan, and while I was speaking to him about the elections, just talking to him about what he's been doing to support candidates and how he's shifted even the hearts and minds of candidates and elected officials, I had gotten a text message from an individual I was helping that was detained for 9 months at California City. He was speaking about Palestine to his fellow passenger in the plane. He was very passionate. He's talking about what's happening in Gaza, and he's stateless. He's from Jerusalem, but he's been here for 20 years. And the person he was speaking to was an informant. And then they reported him to the FBI. Immediately when he left the plane, they escorted him and then detained him, and they sent him to Adelanto. And he had a green card. He was that same week, he was gonna get his citizenship. And he just was released today. And I just got news, his wife said the judge court ordered him to be released. And this is from the work of Latino and Muslim youth. An attorney paid him $8,000 and he never heard from him. Then his wife called me and they said, oh, I know you've worked for Congress. I know you do this work with Latino Muslim Community, advocate for our communities. Can you please try to get my husband out? He's been there for 9 months. They've called many very well-known nonprofit institutions, and they said, we cannot help him. And you know why? Because it wasn't just that he was someone that checked a box that was just wrongfully detained, but because there was a huge issue with an informant, it became very complicated. And she just said, what can you do? I said, I'm going to call the chaplain. I'm going to call the warden, and I'm going to get you a public defender. This situation is one of thousands of detainees that are in our community that are Latino, Arab, Asian, and wrongfully detained because they're speaking out for Palestine. This guy innocently was so passionate speaking to his colleague, and she was listening and nodding the whole time, listening and like showing like she was just as excited as he was, and as he was sharing, she was taking notes and texting. I want you to understand that it's the little guys, it's the ordinary people that advocate. You don't need to have a lot of money. You just have to try, and you can't give up. You can't just submit an inquiry and just wait for the paper to return. It's not like that. We, on Sunday, on Easter Day, I was working with a public defender in LA. His name was Raj. And I asked him, you know, if he needs housing, we'll give him housing. We were going through the habeas with him. He said, yeah, he was detained from Washington, Afghan refugee. Okay, he had just resettled 6 months ago. An SIV, he actually worked for the government as a translator, and they detained him. And he's considered, if he goes back to his country, because they try to deport him to Afghanistan, they'll kill him because he's considered a traitor to the country. And they still detained him because he didn't have his driver's license when he was going to the bank. He went to do a transaction at the bank and he didn't have his driver's license, and it was a $2,000 transaction, and they flagged him. And as soon as he was walking out of the bank, there was ICE agents detaining him. I can't, I'm not, there's a whole lawsuit, so I can't speak about it. But I want you to understand that these people, their lives are put in danger. And every single day, we live comfortably while they are just looking to us to advocate for them. And his attorney said, can you please, I appreciate your advocacy, but we need actually a location for him if we release him, because he's in the process of being released. And this is Abdul. And I said, okay, well, let me call. It was on a Sunday. I was calling nonprofits. No one was available. And I had a small budget. But I said, okay, you know what? We'll go ahead and give him housing at a motel for a week because he lives in Washington and he needs to be transferred. He said, no, we need actual address for home. I used my own address, and he was released on an Easter day on Sunday. So we're putting ourselves on the line. I know Hasan is putting himself on the line. He's getting death threats. The state-sanctioned violence from Palestine to Mexico to LA is the same white supremacy. It's all connected.
Yep.
And we all have to understand that our complicity, like our complacency, our comfort is what's harming them. We're not willing to give up our own comfort. He is, right? And so I just want to make everybody know you don't have to have a huge platform. I know he does, and we're so grateful. Hind's poor girl, I mean, she is just one out of 70,000 children that have been slaughtered. But now we see Iran and we see Lebanon. She is the children in Iran, the 164 girls in the girls' school. And that is our tax-paying dollars. And so I just want to first and foremost acknowledge that everyone's playing a part, and we recognize that. But really, it's our comfort, being willing to be uncomfortable. And with that, I do want to give the platform to Prem first. He's here to document Hasan. And I know you did the Q&A for the Voice of Hind Rajab before, but now I'm going to be asking you questions. How did you feel when you first watched this film?
I think when I first saw the film, one thing that stuck out to me, which I'm sure stuck out to many of you, is a question they did a very wonderful job of illustrating, which is the idea that one has to comply and correspond with the regime that is brutalizing you in the first place. You saw the frustrations play out with the characters in the movie and how undignified it seems. I think the question of dignity is obviously central to the Palestinian question, is central to the story of Hind Rajab. And the idea that not only was Hind's life and the lives of the medics that were sent to save her and her family members stolen, but her dignity was. And the dignity as well of the members of the Palestinian Red Crescent who were trying their best as much as they could to save her.
Can you possibly speak up?
Oh, do we have the?
Yeah, I'm sorry about
Nick?
that.
Put the mic next to you.
Is Nick here?
I can project. I can
I'm
project.
sorry.
I can project.
You know what?
I'm
Can you
turning
get
the knob
Nick?
right now to 12.
To 12.
We're gonna do 13. So too much. We'll go back to 12. The question of dignity is central to this movie, and when I think of when he's asking, you know, why do we have to comply with this entity that is the reason this little girl is lost? I think of my own questioning in the halls of Congress or the State Department where I'm asking, you know, how or why are you comfortable voting for this, supporting this, having your name on this? And I think of the writer Prem Levi, who wrote about the experience in the Holocaust, and there was there's this line in his book, Prem Levi's book, on where there's this moment where a Holocaust guard is asked, you know, why? In a very basic sense, why? And the guard turns towards the protagonist in the scene and says, "Hier is no kein warum." There is no why here. What I take from that moment in that book is that to ask why is to ask for some sense of logic, for some sense of human reason as to how and why you could be a part of something. And that also means that to answer that question is to give the asker dignity. It's to give them a response as if you and them are on the same level of logic or reason or morals. And when I'm in the halls of Congress and I'm asking these questions, I think back to that moment so often. I think back to this movie so often, where the question of why has so much weight to it, because any lay person who observes this can see what that guard said, actually, that there is no why here. And I think more and more people are beginning to understand how bitter and cruel it is to be not only robbed of one's life, one's possibility, the constellation of everything you were a part of, but also the dignity of a why. And so when I saw this film, I thought of all of that at once because it captures it so beautifully. And that base cruelty, I think, is something that is driving so many people to feel so activated, that I feel that we fear we're getting so desensitized to the bombing over there. But I think this moment is making people feel resensitized to it because they're understanding that there's through lines between all this. There's through lines between a Holocaust guard saying that there is no why here, to a member of Congress supporting modern day Nazism. And that we're not just mere readers of the history in the past, but observers of that right now. And so I know this movie is quite painful, but I think it captures that so beautifully. And I also just want to share my own thanks for all of you for watching it, because I know it feels like so much, but something Hasan was saying earlier was that, especially for many people in this room, I'm sure a lot of you are very engaged and very always reading the news, always being very informed. And sometimes you forget the very elementary and simple feelings of what's at stake here. And so I'm just so thankful the film was made. I'm so horrified that it needed to be made. But I think if there's one way to commemorate and honor him, I think this is a pretty good way of starting it.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I wanted to connect with the interview that you did with Kauthar Ben Hania. How was it watching the film and then actually speaking to the director?
Yeah, the movie is definitely a tough but necessary watch. And she was able to so perfectly capture the many different invisible forms of structural violence so perfectly. I know I talked about this in the beginning as well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yay.
I talked about this in the intro as well, but one thing that sticks with you throughout the entire movie is the fact that Israel is a constant presence, a constant threat on the lives of ordinary Palestinians in every single moment. And it's not just the surveillance apparatus, but it's also the fact that even to make a simple demand, to send an ambulance 7 minutes away, you have to go through numerous different hurdles. You have to utilize other outside groups like Red Crescent to Red Cross, and then to Red Cross to Kojat. And I feel like that is one of the aspects that is lost to the outsider. As far as my own personal involvement with this as well, beyond the interview that I conducted, but Prem briefly alluded to it as well, but I covered the story while it was happening. And I've covered many stories like Hind's throughout the last 2.5 years, every single day. And Prem has as well. And one of the things that I personally experienced watching the movie was almost like a release, because we do this every day, and when it's your job, when it's your duty, when you feel like you have a moral obligation to talk about these things, to try to bring awareness to the sheer cruelty, you kind of forget, or you kind of how do I explain it? You start to tune out the violence to a certain degree. And watching the movie itself almost was a reminder of all of the different stories, just like Hind's, that I've covered throughout the last 2.5 years. And it was this massive release, and was very emotional for that reason. I mean, I cried so much. I cried for basically, I cried enough tears for the last 2.5 years watching it. And I think that is a shared experience for many as well. I saw a lot of people were very distraught in the aftermath of this. But yeah, the director was obviously, I mean, this is a tough subject. I asked her as well, like, how, like, do you feel a responsibility? Like, how this is a very complicated thing to be able to communicate with the necessary tension, and I think she understood the weight of that assignment, and did a very good job at producing something that I think brings a human element to a story that most people are familiar with as a simple byline.
Have you seen, since you, I'm sorry, thanks. Have you seen any shift from all of the work that you've been doing, whether it's on Twitch or whether it's going to these rallies, in regards to advocating for people like Hind, advocating against the genocide? Have you seen a shift with members of Congress? Have you seen a shift with politicos, with the media, because of your work?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's just because of my work. I think everyone plays a massive role in this. You all in this room play a massive role in this as well. Every conversation that you have with a loved one, every time you move the needle in the right direction, you are advancing this cause in a very meaningful way, in a way that you might not even perceive immediately. As far as my own personal experience goes, yes, I mean, I've had conversations with Ro Khanna, for example, at DNC. Now, a lot of people here are probably familiar with what Ro Khanna has been doing for like the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And he's become one of the most prominent figures, one of the most prominent critics of Israel in Congress. When I talked to him at the DNC and brought up the notion that Israel is an apartheid state, that Israel was committing a genocide, he was very resistant to accept that. But I think that's what congresspersons are supposed to do when they get new information, when they have these sorts of conversations, they're supposed to change their minds. And I think I give a lot of credit for Ro Khanna for that. And now he's become, one of the most outspoken critics of Israel in Congress over that time frame. And there are many others as well. I go to student encampments. I've gone to a lot of protests. People do come up to me and they say, "Look, I had no idea what was going on." There's a lot of Jewish protesters as well, Jewish anti-Zionists that come up and tell me that the interviews that I've conducted with people like Simone Zimmerman, who did the documentary Israelism, and things like that have played a big role in them changing their minds after being inundated with pro-Israel messaging from a very early age. So, I have a lot of anecdotes, but at the end of the day, I'm just one person, and I can't stress this enough. It's the people in my community that have those real personal conversations with their loved ones that have far more impact than I ever could have.
I remember having a conversation with a 75-year-old Jewish American, and he was talking about how he's been indoctrinated to support Israel and to defend Israel, and he watched No Other Land, and this was at a church that I hosted an event in Koreatown. And he said, had I not watched this movie, I would have never seen a different perspective, because I am inundated with our perspective, and I do not have friends outside of my spaces that could share this kind of information. And he said the fact that this is a documentary is happening in real time, and I'm seeing the Israeli settlers and seeing the brutal occupation from the IOF. Like, no one could tell me a different story. I'm seeing it. It's real. And I think that the amplifying the films, you've done that with No Other Land, you've done that with Voice of Hind Rajab. I know you said you even covered the story with Hind. Journalism plays a huge role, and I wanted to ask you about how that's changing in the halls of Congress. I know you are a journalist and you're in DC, if you could share that.
In terms of just how things are changing.
Yeah.
I think
It doesn't have
it's-
to be a big change. It could
Sure,
be
sure,
like-
yes. I think a more helpful or a helpful way to consider this question on whether things are changing, on how politicos and political operatives and members of Congress are facing the changes in this country on the question of Palestine, is to consider what the realm of acceptability and what the realm of tolerability is, and what baselines are. Things like Block the Bombs, for example, an act that in some ways is actually quite modest given what is actually unfolding in Palestine. It calls to block some level of weapons to Israel, not all of them. The idea that that bill could have 60-some co-sponsors, if you had said that even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that would have been a ridiculous notion. And I don't say that to overstate the changes in Congress, but I also don't want to understate them either, because, momentum is great. That's obviously a wonderful thing. At the same time, the Gaza ceasefire is still being ridiculously violated. I mean, just the other day, 5 humanitarian groups, including Oxfam, released a sort of report card laying out how, I believe, out of 26 metrics, the U.S.-Israeli-led Board of Peace is meeting about 5 of those metrics for the ceasefire. And that's just in Gaza alone. Of course, there's the West Bank that's being absolutely brutalized. There's Lebanon, Iran, and so forth. So momentum can only take you so far. I think what's been more revelatory for me in recent weeks, as I've been in the halls of Congress, and then witnessing what the media is focusing on instead, which happens to be a gentleman to my left, is the complete disjointing of what the we is in political and media discourse. I think there is a very small subsect of American society that is largely in DC, New York, parts of Los Angeles, and a few other cities, who are very fixated on very small subsects of conversation that are so meta and so removed from any basic question that any person in this country faces, whether it's their material conditions or their concerns with what their money is going to instead, that I think there is this sort of breaking point threshold where like the media exists so in such an insular bubble and the politicians only read stuff from that media. And that is especially hyper-localized on Twitter, which is, of course, a very Nazified place itself, such that all these conversations about like what is and is not acceptable to members of Congress just seems like almost besides the point. They are so completely alien to what everyone else in this room, everyone else in this country feels, that it's unsustainable for them. And I think the simplest way to distill this is that when I walk through Congress and ask them about things like the Manab school strike that killed upwards of maybe 160 schoolgirls, it's uncounted, which we can't get an answer to that, which is ridiculous. When I ask them things like that, or when I ask them about the strike on an Iranian naval ship that was not even in a combative pose, that was returning from a training exercise at the invitation of India, also in the first hours of this liberatory war, they are pivoting away from sort of the knee-jerk talking point answers to just kind of lashing out because they don't really know what to say. Because in the past, it wasn't a serious question. It wasn't something that was existing in the halls of Congress. And so I think the amount of time they have left to continue in this way, I think, is beginning to extinguish. And I think that is a sort of quiet momentum that I think people outside of DC can't always realize, which is just the disjointed nature of like how all of us are living in one reality, and about 500 members of Congress and their consultants are living in another, in a way that I think is much more drastic than ever before.
Thank you. I want to hear more about your trip to Cuba and what were some of the parallels that you experienced and understood between Palestine and Cuba.
I feel like I'm answering a lot of the same questions that I did in the intro, but I feel like you asked me this, you wanted me to talk about this stuff, and I feel like I blew my load early, sorry. But
Well, some of these people didn't get to hear you.
Okay,
I know
well,
at least 30 of them. So these
yeah.
are new, some of them are new
all right,
crowds.
So reload.
look,
Reload.
yeah. So,
Do you want me to scratch that question?
yeah, no.
The second coming of Hasan.
Someone give him a coffee or something.
Let's give him a round of applause for
No,
being
no.
here. Just for being here.
No, I don't mind talking about Cuba. I talk about it all the time.
But we need to talk about the parallels of what you experienced.
So, before I went to Cuba, I was having a conversation with Ben Rhodes, who is the national security advisor to Barack Obama. He played a formative role in the JCPOA, the Iran denuclearization agreement, and also in the Cuban normalization. And Ben told me, you're going to go there and you're going to be very sad. I said, why? He said, there is unbearable amounts of poverty in Cuba. And he was right. I first landed in Cuba on a humanitarian aid mission alongside hundreds of other activists, advocates, organizers, journalists, politicians, delivering 40 tons of humanitarian aid. And I was taken aback by how beautiful it was at first. I'm not a big nature person. I don't really like going outside at all. Many of you know this, probably. Yeah, I hate touching grass. But I was taken aback by how beautiful it was. I was like, damn, I get why, this was a massive tourism destination for a lot of Americans. In some ways, great thing for Cuba, but it also was a little bit of a burden because that's part of the reason why the island was so dominated by American interests, by the mafia, by criminal elements, the gambling den, a den of sin for many, many years prior to the Cuban Revolution. But after I took in the beauty of Cuba, seeing all the nice old cars and whatnot, I was shook by the unbelievable poverty that I saw. And it made me very sad. these beautiful houses. They looked to be bombed out on the inside. They told me that a big part of the reason was because it's an island and salt water, especially during hurricane season, destroys many of the homes. And because of the blockade, because of the embargo that renders commerce impossible, they are oftentimes incapable of rebuilding these homes. So people just live in these dilapidated buildings. But what Ben didn't tell me was how angry I would get. Because once I was done being sad, I realized this is totally unnecessary. It's totally arbitrary. It's so cruel. It's so unique, this punishment. Well, it's not so unique whenever America or Western forces have their fingerprints all around the world. It's unfortunately cruel, but it's not unique. But I got mad because we were choking this island with 10 million people in it of its unlimited potential. And not only do we do that to Cuba, we're doing that to Gaza.
Yes.
We're doing that to the West Bank.
To Iran now.
And we're doing that to Iran, you're right. But we're also doing that to ourselves. Because the reality of the matter is, you walk or get in a car and go, 10 miles away from where we're at. We're in Culver City, it's a very rich neighborhood. Sony's here, right?
Yeah, it wasn't always.
Okay, I didn't know that. Apparently it wasn't always here. But it's here now. But it's a rich neighborhood. You got Airbnbs, this house is nice. The toilet in the back has Toto in it. I mean, Japanese got a bidet. Yeah, warm seats, all that. But you go 10 miles down, you'll see a lot of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of potential that we're starving. Because there's no difference between someone born into an affluent family a couple zip codes away than someone born into a poor family. The only difference is we're robbing these people of their potential because we refuse to build a necessary baseline. And on top of that, especially when it comes to fighting back against other countries and robbing other countries of their potential, we take it one step further. We destroy them. And oftentimes we destroy them for no reason other than an ideological battle that people decided to fight. Because sometimes it's not even about, the resource extraction that you learn about with countries like Iraq, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the goals are ideological. And in some ways there's a through line between Cuba and Gaza as well. Because in many respects, Israel's goals in Gaza are ethnic cleansing. And ethnic cleansing is an ideological battle. It's not that they want the Gaza shoreline. I'm sure they want that as well. It's nice. But the purpose there is the underpinning ideology coming to its final conclusion. Zionism, a fascist ideology being exhausted, being pushed to its final limit. Because Zionism is a fascist ideology. It's an ethno-religious, supremacist, exterminationist ideology that demands that there are no non-Jewish people that live in this country. There can never be non-Jewish people that live in this country. They must be dominated and inevitably pushed away. So what I saw in Cuba, beyond the ideological, the war that is being waged upon the Cuban population was in many ways similar to what I've seen Palestinians experience, the constant presence of an occupying force. Now, of course, in Cuba, the American fingerprints are everywhere, but the Americans are not everywhere. They are there, though, on the island. They're in Guantanamo Bay.
Wow.
Earlier, I talked about how there was no oil that was sent to the island of Cuba for the past 4 months, with the exception of this new Russian oil tanker that just arrived, cutting through the blockade that America had enforced. There was 2 exceptions to that rule. One was the private facilities, in an effort to basically create class antagonism in a socialist country, in a communist country, by force, starving out the population, starving out the hospitals, not allowing the actual country to have the necessary resource, oil, so that they can go about their daily lives, but then giving private hotels owned by Americans the oil instead. So on the one hand, they're killing children. On the other hand, they're saying, look, this is what you could have if you became a capitalist country. There's also another exception, though, I forgot to mention earlier, and that's Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay is owned by the United States of America. It's on the Cuban island. And Guantanamo Bay never stopped receiving oil. So, 10 miles away, you got 10 million people starving, suffering, going through rolling blackouts. And 10 miles right off the shoreline, you have American soldiers. They drive the latest cars because they get shipped in to Guantanamo Bay. They got a fucking McDonald's there. Sorry for cursing. It's true. They have a McDonald's on the island.
At Guantanamo Bay.
At Guantanamo Bay, there is a McDonald's. Yeah. They get the food shipped in. They get to live basically like they're living in the United States of America.
So,
That dynamic exists in places like Gaza as well, where on the one hand, if you're born on one side of the boundary,
That's true.
you live in a hermetically sealed open air prison where this occupying force gets to control every aspect of your life. They engage in mass surveillance, unlawful detentions at times. They target you. They blackmail you to turn you into a potential collaborator, even if you don't want to do it. They ruin your life in the process. They destroy desalination plants. They don't let you have access to clean water. Another thing that I saw in Cuba as well, because the water pumps require electricity. When the electricity cuts out, you don't have access to running water. I mean, that's a humanitarian rights violation, right? And both Israel and America are engaging in very similar violent endeavors. And again, totally unnecessary, totally arbitrary, incredibly violent, and a war crime, because that's what collective punishment is.
Yes.
The last thing I'll say in terms of the similarities is I talked to a Palestinian by the name of Miran from Gaza. And he was the one who said, this is exactly, like, I grew up in Gaza. I came to Cuba to go to medical school. I wanted to become a doctor so I could go back to Gaza one day and help my people. And he got a free education in Cuba, in Havana. And he told me Gaza and Cuba are going through very similar things. The only difference is Cuba is not being bombed yet. But the constant presence and the economic warfare and the restrictions that we experience here in Cuba are not dissimilar to those that I experienced growing up in Gaza. So imperialism is imperialism everywhere. It's violent, it's unnecessary, but it's not unstoppable, right? So if I could leave you with some words of confidence, what I'll tell you is this. There's a lot of similarities between the Israel lobby and what a lot of people call the Gusano lobby.
yeah.
Okay? They are tailored very closely after one another. The difference, however, is that the influence of Israel in both American foreign policy and domestic policy is far more pervasive than any other country out there, right? We know that already. Benjamin Netanyahu treats Donald Trump like a flesh puppet. So if we could all get together and fight back against the pervasive, malignant influence of the Zionist lobby over the course of the last 2.5 years, and combat it to such a degree that there's a complete sea change, a complete shift in the attitudes, a complete recognition of the crimes that Israel has committed against the Palestinians, then I think the Cuban lobby is nothing in comparison to that. So, for me, I see the victories of broad awareness initiatives. And instead of saying, look, there's a lot more that we need to do, which I recognize, I understand, I try to channel the successes of resilient and steadfast people who have fought long and hard, withstood job loss, sometimes been jailed, all the protesters, all the student encampments that sometimes were brutalized by the police or by pro-Israel groups. And I think to myself, if we could take down the Israeli lobby and its influence in America and change the collective consciousness of everyday Americans on the issue of Israel, after 80 years of propaganda, billions of dollars spent, then we can do that for Cuba as well.
Listening to you speak about the hope part of this, like, it's not impossible to defeat or to conquer imperialism. I think when you think about, I was the first SJP president at UCLA in 2003. No. My son is 26 and I have a grandchild. But my point is that we were learning from the divestment of South Africa in order for us to run a referendum for the divestment of Israel with UCLA, and it took 30 years for, it was 1986 when there was a divestment in South Africa, but it happened, right? We talked about, like, it can happen. And it was very unpopular to even say divestment of South Africa. It was almost to the point where we know that, Nelson Mandela was jailed and he was asked, like, could you please tell your people to drop their arms? And he said, I won't, right? And it wasn't until governments divested and stopped giving aid to South Africa that apartheid ended. So we know in history that this can happen. And at one point it was unpopular, and it was people were demonized, dehumanized for standing up. And when Black people in South Africa rose up, they were called terrorists, just like Palestinians, right? So I do have hope, and I do think what you just said, and I think people need to hear that it can happen. With that, I want to just say there's one more question for Hasan, because we do want to wrap this up. It's past his bedtime.
Oh yeah.
The question that I have is, what next? We see this movie. We feel angry. Some feel hopeful, but I feel like we should organize. And I know these legislators aren't going to save us. We know this, right? I used to work for a member of Congress. I worked for a state legislator. They're not going to save us. As a journalist, what do you think the answer is to mobilizing people? Because some people, regardless of what's happening in Iran and in Lebanon and what we've seen in Palestine, people are still complacent.
I think this gets to something actually both of you were just getting at, which is that it feels, the horrors of the world feel so heavy right now because there's so much of it. There's no shortage of it. But we are all coming from an ancestral pathway of so many people who at some point were met with a question of right versus wrong, and they chose right. And that's why we're all here today. And in that same spirit, we're also all parts of different constellations of people for whom really care about things and maybe are some people who don't yet. But in any case, everyone here has a torch that they're carrying. And if there's one purpose that we have, is that as much as possible, it's to light someone else's torch. And we've seen that over and over and over again over the past 2.5 years in so many beautiful ways. And each person that gets their torch lit has 10 more that they get to. I think very often to many of the encampments, but especially the Colombian encampment, as I was reporting on it, as I was being, well, yeah, go for it. The epicenter of the encampment movement, of course, also one of the ones that was most heavily smeared, one that was heavily targeted with students like Mahmoud Khalil, Mohsen Madawi, Leka Cordia, and many more. There were so many expressions in that encampment, despite how often it was smeared by some of the most self-important magazines in this country, of what humanity could be. All I saw most in that encampment was people from all over the world with sometimes nothing in common except the belief that what their dollars were going towards and what their name was a part of was not something they accepted. And there were weeks and weeks of students, from Bollywood students groups doing dances to Jewish and Muslim student groups giving each other space to pray and learning about each other's traditions, to many agnostic people just getting to enjoy the spirit and the experience of being alongside their fellow students. It gave us a reminder that there is a wanting in this country for something that has not been represented up to this point, which is just niceness and something gentle and something that recognizes, to what Hasan is saying, that so much of our lives are random, that we're ultimately just outputs of a lottery of existence, and that the only way to win that lottery is so that it doesn't matter what number you pull, that every single person, not only in this country but in this planet, has a guaranteed level of dignity and respect. And so I really don't think there's as much complacency as we might fear. There might be a lack of activation or a lack of engagement with something, but that also is part of the lottery of existence. Some people are born into something that shields them from seeing what we see. That can feel like a challenge, that can also be an opportunity. And we've seen that over and over again from the 75-year-old that you mentioned, that there's a lot of people that just need to be met, that just need to know that you're there, that they need to feel the warmth of your torch, as cheesy as that sounds. And I feel like not only is it incumbent on us, that's probably the most central purpose we can get out of this. You know, I think just lastly, I think of Hind once again. Hind Rajab is one of the most, unfortunately, famous victims of this genocide. Her name is known around the world. And if we cannot get justice for Hind and some level of accountability for Hind, whatever that means, what does that mean for the thousands and thousands of other kids in Gaza and Lebanon and now Iran, whose names we don't know? And so that has to be our central calling. Because we know her name. There's so many more names that are being threatened of being wiped away in the sands of time. But I think everyone in this room has no interest in that. And everyone in this room has a lot more power and compassion and care and gentleness, and also grace that you've been given by people in your life too. So all the grace that you've been given, all the time and patience and love that have been granted to you, all you can do is to give that to other people and to welcome them into the love and deep pain and care that you feel in this room. Because it feels like a lot, but it also feels so beautiful and abundant, and maybe even more abundant than the horrors we've had to face up to this point.
Thank you. I just want to add to Block the Bombs. It's not enough, right? We know that divestment needs to be pure, and it needs to be 100% divestment in Israel. But with that, I just want to talk about the takeaway, and Hasan will share the Justice for Hind Rajab Act, and if you could talk about that effort as a takeaway for today.
What do you want me to?
So if you can, you know about the
Okay.
act, right?
Yeah.
To urge people to. Okay, do you want me to?
I mean, so everyone has one of these postcards.
Yeah, do you guys
right?
have these?
Yep.
Yes.
So, everyone here,
If you do not have one on your seat,
Yeah.
you can have a pile in the back and I can pass it out.
Oprah style, you get a postcard. You get a postcard. Everyone here has a postcard. It says, if you put your name on it for your representative, and you urge your representative to support the Justice for Hind Rajab Act, HR 7903, to ensure accountability for the killing of Hind Rajab, document patterns of civilian harm in Gaza, and reaffirm U.S. commitment to the Geneva Conventions and the prosecution of war crimes. It also demands you urge to support the Block the Bombs Act, HR 3565, which would halt U.S. arms transfers used in violations of international humanitarian law, stop using our tax dollars to bomb and shoot and kill children and families. It is the bare minimum, but just like BDS is the bare minimum, boycott, divestment, and sanctions is supposed to be the least consequential thing that we're demanding in this situation. I think we should be demanding accountability and punishments.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Whether it be for Israel and the Israeli occupying force war criminals and the war crimes they've engaged in, dual citizens that have gone to Israel and come back, which, of course, one of the torch carriers of Hind Rajab here is the Hind Rajab Foundation as well, that has done phenomenal work documenting some of these war crimes that the Nazi troops have volunteered themselves on social media, until, of course, IOF Command decided, you guys got to stop filming yourselves doing these fucking war crimes. But that work still continues. But yeah, if you think your voice is inconsequential, it's not. I always think back to conversations that I have with politicians. One of the things I always ask is, are they stupid or are they cynical? I asked this to Rashida Tlaib. She was one of the first people I asked this to. And she told me that it's not that they are cynical, that they're aware of the forces outside, people like yourselves, the overwhelming majority, demanding change, demanding we re-examine our relationship with Israel. In many instances, it sounds insane, I know, because you live as ordinary citizens, you live around other human beings with moral backbone, with moral compass. But many people in Congress only talk to lobbyists. It sounds insane, but they only talk to lobbyists. Lobbyists have their phone numbers. They only talk to other congresspersons, so they're totally bubbled in. As Prem also correctly pointed to, they only read like 4 different newspapers, if they know how to read at all. and they watch like 3 different TV channels. So all they hear from is Jake Tapper, Dana Bash. If they have some diversity in their media diet, exactly. Mark Levin.
Oh yeah, God.
But this is an opportunity for them to hear from you. If you go to their town halls, and if you if you engage them with actual legislation, it would shock you how effective you can be. So let your voices be heard.
And with that, I do want to also say one more thing. Yes, you need to talk to your members of Congress. Yes, you need to fill these out and send them out. But if you can't go on the streets and you can't speak up at work and you can't speak to your family, you can donate. There's another act of solidarity. Hasan is helping us raise funds for Palestine Red Crescent, for emergency assistance, for the movie that you watched, right? The ER workers, their lives are at risk every single day, and we need support for them. And then also for Latino and Muslim unity, we have a very popular project called Taco Trucks at Every Mosque. Because you guys heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
And we build bridges by promoting unity and encouraging and fostering conversations and intersectional struggles. We've hosted 463 taco trucks at different mosques, from Santa Ana to Santa Clara to San Diego to Rosarito.
Oh wow.
And provided over 1 million free halal tacos As a vehicle for social change, we've done habeas applications at taco trucks at every mosque, cash assistance applications, even provided 24,000 vaccinations in the height of COVID at taco trucks at every mosque. So we're mobilizing people to turn out to vote. We helped to vote. We were able to get 400,000 people to turn out to vote because of taco trucks at every mosque. So we're hoping for this election year. I know Hasan, you're doing the work for this. That's like the number one priority for you, right?
I mean, it's one of the priorities.
Well, you were when I was talking to you, you're like, it's election season. So tell me about that. That's the end of everything is happening. We're seeing that happen. What are we going to do for 2026?
What about CA governor? Can you help Butch Ware? Like, is he...
Well, we're a nonprofit, so we can't talk about that. But,
Yep.
but can you tell us why do people need to mobilize? Because that people are giving up on the government, on the system.
Look, politicians, they're supposed to be servants.
Yep.
Of all of us, right? They're supposed to be public service. They're supposed to serve our needs. They're supposed to represent our interests, but they don't.
Nope.
Unfortunately, they do not do that. However, I would say that in this wave, in this midterm season, especially in the primaries, we have the opportunity to make a lot of changes, a lot of necessary changes to the makeup of the Democratic Party, which happens to be the only viable option we have in our current duopoly. I'm not against third parties at all. I will, however, say that litigating ballot access is unfortunately a very long and convoluted and difficult process, especially when a lot of people don't even look at third parties as a serious option. But there are a lot of great candidates out there. There are a lot of Zoran-style candidates out there that have seen the way things are going and want to make that change. That are responsive to the needs of the population, that are responsive to the needs of ordinary citizens, that want to put an end to all of this endless war that seemingly sucks up all of our resources. We don't have enough money for schools. We only have unlimited funds to blow up schools.
Yep.
Yeah, but
Make that the truth.
slowly but surely we can make that change. So it's not just about speaking to one another, speaking to your loved ones and convincing them, but it's also about, it's a multifaceted approach. It's also about getting politicians elected. So there are some great candidates. Unfortunately, in California, there aren't that many great candidates, I will be honest. But
One's almost out of the race.
still go out and vote for, I guess, the most left candidate you possibly can find in every election. So definitely go out and vote. It's the least significant, most consequential thing you can do.
You guys, he said vote. So if he says vote, we can vote. Okay? Because there are people that are saying don't vote. It doesn't matter. I want to give just the platform for questions. We'll only take 3 in the interest of time. I'm going to go ahead and go ahead. Ahmed, yes.
That's fine. So I want to say one thing, and I really appreciate you saying to vote, but I want to add to that to vote down ballot, because a lot of times we end up voting for looking at just the congressional, maybe the governorship, but you don't look at your local councils. Now I know in California we have 450 cities, and I know because I'm a council member in one of the cities. But you have to vote down ballot, and it is very easy to engage with your local council members. You can actually see them. You can go to the council meetings, and you can talk to them. You can face them. You have public comment time. You can also go to your city website and go or call your clerk and look up all the donations. And then you can call them out on their donations. A lot of candidates locally, we are losing on the local level to a lot of right-wingers because no one pays attention, because these are nonpartisan seats. So please look down ballot and make sure everybody votes all the way down and vet those candidates.
Thank you. I want to add to that. Latino Muslim unity, we passed 13 ceasefire resolutions in Southern California in mostly Latino populated cities. And because members of Congress were not listening to us, they were not taking our phone calls, nor were they taking meetings. We saw that they were at least listening to us when we were on the mic at the city council. And so I want you to continue to do that work, even if they don't listen to you at the congressional. With that, I have one more question. I'm sorry, we're just like 11 o'clock, we need to be out of here. I mean, like, in your cars, okay? One more question. Yes. Yes.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Lisa Undo. I'm currently a pre-law student at USC, and I work for the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I've heard so many good things about you. One question I have for Hasan is, why does the rule of law not apply to Israel, like, at all? I feel like if it was any other country, there would be some form of resistance against all these atrocities. So why does Israel get passed?
The children, people.
I mean, the rule of law doesn't apply to America.
What? Yes, that is
So,
true.
and
Come all
Israel
the way.
is an extension of America, or
Yes.
at least for a very long time, it was an extension of America, and now, well, now the dynamic has shifted in favor of Israel a little bit, maybe perhaps more than it ever had. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. America gets to do whatever the fuck it wants, and no one can say anything about it. It is the global hegemon, and with that comes a lot of power. And Israel knows that, and has made itself an irreplaceable force for many, many years, and has taken advantage of that status, being an unsinkable aircraft carrier in a resource-rich region, and a very important Cold War ally with its own espionage capabilities, and has used that to gain special access and special privileges. There's a reason why there's no other ethnic group or religious group or no other nationality that gets to have such a significant lobby and have such pervasive and sophisticated influence peddling operations operating on U.S. soil without any scrutiny whatsoever. They don't have to be registered with FARA. They don't get, foreign agent registration. And they've used and abused that special privilege to such a degree that, especially with Donald Trump, even on Trump 1, and certainly now in Trump 2, they've exhausted that to such a degree that they are now completely controlling American foreign policy in the Middle Eastern region. But that's also created a lot of resentment. And I think that they have used and abused that special privilege to such a degree that most Americans are now aware of what Israel gets up to. So, like I said, there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And I do think that we will see Zionism fail in our lifetime.
Oh,